You ever see your life get hijacked by a person with a clipboard and a God complex? I have firsthand front row seat. The very first time I watched the sheriff's deputies pull my white pine logs out of the Pine View HOA's maintenance shed, one by one, all tagged and numbered like they were evidence in some crime show. Well, I swear I almost laughed. And right there, behind those flashing blue lights, was Karen. Yeah, her arms folded so tight across her ribs, I thought she might snap. Tried her hardest to pretend she wasn't watching her precious little kingdom collapse plank by plank. You want a scene? Picture this. Morning sun turning those QR codes on my logs into a disco ball, catching everybody's eyes, flashing straight back at Karen's lies. Behind me, the neighbors, the loyal Pine View crowd, finally waking up, finally starting to realize who was robbing who. I didn't have to say a single word, and let me tell you, the evidence did all the shouting. See, I'm not the type that goes looking for drama. Never have been. But when you live on 10 stubborn acres of Carolina soil that your dad left you, soil you sweat for, bled for, build on with your own hands, you learn a thing or two. The main thing? Sometimes trouble doesn't even bother to knock. Sometimes it just waltzes right across your property line and heels, clutching a stack of paperwork, calling herself president. My place sits just outside Pine View Estates. And if you've never heard of it, let me paint a picture. It's the kind of neighborhood where people trim their hedges with a level and call the HOA if your mailbox isn't the right shade of beige. Now, I was never a part of their HOA. Never signed their contracts, never joined their meetings, not once. My old man, he built our sawmill with calluses and pride. Left me two things, this patch of land and one rock-solid rule. Mind your work, mind your word, and never, ever let anyone tell you what your land ought to look like. Karen Lofton? She never heard that rule, or maybe she just thought it didn't apply to her. The very first time she approached me, she strode up my gravel driveway like it was her own runway. Heels clicking, chin up, clipboard tucked so tight on her arm, I thought it was surgically attached. She didn't bother to ask, she just announced, "We need the machinery moved out of the visual corridor. It disrupts community harmony." Real smooth voice, but those eyes? Scanning my land like she was already drawing up the blueprints for a battle she expected to win. I just leaned back on my old truck, arms folded, and said, "I'm not in your HOA." And she smiled, if you can call it a smile. More like a warning label. Adjacent properties still influence our aesthetic environment, Trevor. I'm sure you understand. Oh, I understood all right. Just not the way she wanted. She really thought anywhere she could see, she could rule. I didn't argue. Sometimes the best opening move is saying nothing. Just let them hear their own echo. Then came the letters, monthly, stamped with that fancy Pine View seal, always full of demands dressed up in HOA talk. Mow your grass to match the gradient standard. Repaint your shed to a neutral palette. Reposition your sawmill to reduce visual disruption. Signed off every time with their slogan, "Preserving the beauty we share." Share? We didn't share a damn thing except a property line and bad blood. And the more I ignored them, the more Karen ramped up like she thought compliance and weakness were the same thing. When that didn't work, she filed a petition, claimed there was a mapping error, insisted my land should fall under Pine View jurisdiction. I had to fork over money for a surveyor and a land use lawyer. For months, $7,000, one court hearing, and I won. The judge tossed her annexation attempt straight into the trash. But the way Karen looked at me outside that courthouse, ice cold, deliberate, like she was already plotting the next move, I knew we weren't anywhere close to done. And yeah, a few weeks later, some environmental officers showed up, anonymous report about fuel contamination. They looked, apologized, left, and as their truck disappeared, I knew exactly who'd called it in. Still, I didn't react. I just filed it away. See, Karen wanted to yank me off balance, get me angry. But me? I was patient. I wanted her to get tangled in her own web. About then, I started building a little guest cabin up on the ridge, facing the lake. Nothing fancy, just a spot for my sister's kids to stay when they came to visit. Only problem? That ridge sits about 20 yards from the Pine View entrance, and Karen, she just couldn't stand that. I'd see her stop her Lexus, just stare at the 100 white pine logs I'd stacked. Not a word, not a wave, just eyes full of calculation. I should have known something was up. And sure enough, one night, after 15 brutal hours at the sawmill, I get home and everything feels off. Not dangerous, just wrong. I walk around the cabin site. Heart just drops. Every last log gone. 100 white pine logs, all milled, delivered, stacked, now vanished. No splinters, no scrap. Nothing left but deep tire tracks carved into my land and my tar crumpled like trash. The chain on my winch snapped clean through. Near the treeline, a crushed ginger ale can, the cheap kind of Pine View maintenance guys drink. I walked the whole property, just thinking. Next morning, the sheriff comes by, a deputy named Paul. He crouches, traces the tire tracks with his pen, nods toward the utility road behind the HOA. These lead straight back there. I just stare. I don't need to say it. It's crazy, illegal, but exactly the kind of thing Karen would spin as community rights. So I go to the HOA office. The place smells like lavender cleaner and arrogance. Karen's behind the desk, sorting papers like she's alphabetizing her own importance. She greets me all sugar, like she's selling me a country club membership. "Trevor, what can we help you with today?" I just say real quiet, "The logs. You have them." She pauses just a second, then turns on her ice-calm voice. "We reclaimed material we believed was taken from protected HOA Greenbelt. There was a report. The board approved action." I just look at her and say, "You broke on a private land and stole 100 logs. That's a felony, Karen." She shrugs, like she's brushing off a speck of lint. "If you feel wronged, you're welcome to pursue legal channels." And she turns her back. Big mistake. That same afternoon, a battered old Subaru pulls up in my driveway. Out steps Gary Whitlock, the shy maintenance guy from HOA events. Always looked like he was apologizing for the weather. He handed me this thick folder bound with rubber bands. "You need to see this," he whispers, before she buries it. Inside, emails, screenshots, memos, Karen ordering my logs seized, planning a new pavilion with community materials, vendor proposals addressed to her daughter's company. This wasn't confusion. This was a straight-up heist, covering up private construction under the HOA's dime. Gary's hand shook. She fired me when I asked questions, said I was leaking info. I can't get another HOA job, but I couldn't let her get away with it. I'm not the emotional type, but sometimes betrayal turns quiet men into truth tellers. Karen had stepped on one neck too many. By dawn, my lawyer Carla had a legal case packed up tight. Receipts, GPS harvest data, photos, Gary's whole folder, everything cross-referenced. Sheriff's office got a warrant. They searched the HOA's maintenance shed. We found 70 logs, still stamped with my QR codes. They'd even started milling some into beams for their pavilion. The real kicker? They'd labeled the stacks. HOA Community Structures Phase 1. Arrogance always leaves fingerprints. Karen tried to spin it, called for a big community meeting, figured she could rally her loyalists and bury the mess in legal jargon. I made sure to get a front row seat. The room was packed. Residents, board members, even a few reporters. Karen showed up in a navy blazer, stiff as cardboard, smiled like she was at a charity gala, and started talking about how temporary storage of materials was being misrepresented. When she paused for water, I stood up. "Let's hear your real explanation." I pulled a small speaker from my jacket. Hit play. Karen's own voice, clear as day. "He won't do anything. Use the logs. We'll fold the cost into the pavilion budget. No one checks these invoices anyway." The whole room froze. Somebody near me whispered, "Oh my God." Some tennis dad muttered, "I pay dues for this." The HOA manager, Todd, looked like he wanted to sink into the carpet. Karen tried to talk, but sometimes the loudest thing in the world is when nobody believes you anymore. She searched the crowd for support, didn't find a single pair of eyes. After that, the district attorney pressed charges. There were court hearings, and more records came out. Tens of thousands funneled to vendors tied to Karen's family. Karen came to court with 3 lawyers and a face carved from granite. Gary testified. Carla dismantled their arguments like a machine. The judge's verdict landed like a hammer. Karen sentenced. The board dissolved. Outside administrator called in. Pine View's fancy stone entrance looked emptier than ever. Day after the verdict, I walked my property line alone. No celebration, no gloating, just the wind in the trees, the same way my father used to stand and listen when he needed to think. Karen had built her empire out of rules and control, but the whole thing came down the minute someone stood up with truth instead of fear. That's the thing with HOA power. It only works on folks who forget they have rights. Me? I don't forget, and I don't bend. That morning, the sun cut through the trees just right, shadows long and clean, air finally at peace. Some battles end in fireworks, but others, like this one, they end in silence so sharp you almost hear the land itself breathe again. If I've learned anything living next to Pine View Estates, it's this. In a world full of Karens with clipboards, sometimes your sharpest weapon is just letting the truth swing. So, let me ask you, where do you draw your line? Ever tangled with a Karen, or had to fight for what's yours? Drop your wildest HOA story below, or tell me, do you think justice was really served? I'd love to hear where you stand.